Well, greetings to everyone who is listening out in ALAC and Dogland. My name is Clifton Kenon, and it is a pleasure to serve as your host for the American Lhasa Apso Club Legacy Project. And over the next years, we are going to be chronicling breeders every month, breeders that have given their lives to the Lhasa Apso breed and have given their time and energy and service to the fancy, to the American Kennel Club, and so much more. So if you've ever wondered about someone's story, how they got where they got, if you've ever wanted to know what their advice, who they've been influenced by, etc., I invite you to log on. So we would like to acknowledge the ALAC Board of Directors for stewarding this project and giving time and attention to its necessity and for such a time as this. So welcome again. Today, we are more than privileged to kick off our very first episode of our Breeder Chronicles. And all the way from Washington State, today, Cassandra Dela Rosa of Centauri Lhasa Apsos is joining us, and we will be hearing all about her decades within the Lhasa Apso breed. So, Cassandra, how are you?
I am fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. And, we've been friends, like, I guess ever since I've been breeding Lhasa Apsos, which is about 7 years now. And we've had a lot of conversations, but this is truly special. It's special because we get to start from the beginning and we get to put all the pieces together and hearing about your journey with Lhasa Apsos. So, why don't we just start right there? Why don't you just introduce yourself, your name and your kennel name and where you're from, and then we can dive into some questions about where it all began.
Okay, I'm Cassandra Della Rosa. I have lived in Olympia, Washington since 1973. Uh, I lived in California before that, Pennsylvania before that. Uh, and I have Suntory Lhasa Apsos, which has been in existence since 1970. I guess which makes me older than dirt.
Now it makes you like a fine wine. Why don't we go there? Absolutely. Well, great. So you're out in the Pacific Northwest, 1970, and Cassandra Dela Rosa. So let's talk about where it all started from, my friend. So tell
Okay.
us, who
It
is
started,
Cassandra?
actually, it started uh, in Guadalajara, Mexico. We were, Raul and I went to Guadalajara in 1966, spend the summer so that he could study a graduate program. I studied Spanish, and we were able to afford a small garden apartment in the American sector because the roads were all torn up. You had to walk 2 blocks to get in and out. The people next to us had these 2 dogs, and I have ever since early childhood been absolutely enraptured with dogs. And I had never seen anything like them. One was gold, one was black, and they were especially interesting because they were fearless. They would run the back garden of the complex and chase this garden cat. Now, the garden cat was not a kitty, it was this big cat whose job was to keep rats, big rats, out of the garden and the area. And they chased this cat, which I guess was kind of amused and let them, and they would do the Lhasa war whoop as they chased it and played great games. Uh, the people were from San Francisco, and they told us that the breed was called Lhasa Apso, and they were fairly rare. And I had never seen any before, so I made a note of it mentally and figured that was that. Well,
So
we
as a
went back.
college student, you were studying abroad.
No, we were not college students. We were. I had graduated, and Raul was teaching at college that I attended.
Ah, okay.
So we went back to Pittsburgh, and dogs were out of the question where we lived. And I saw an article in the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, a Sunday supplement, about this rare dog that one of the Mellon family had, and there were pictures, and sure enough, it was a Lhasa Apso. But Mellon family was like Mellon Bank and steel and money, so I knew that this was a very expensive proposition. And again, I thought, well, that's not going to happen. From Pennsylvania, we went to California so Raul could do graduate work at Stanford. And I was teaching to help keep us afloat. So I was in the teacher room one day at break, recess break, and we had a substitute teacher. And she said, well, I've got to run home at noon to take care of my puppies. And I said, oh, puppies, you know. I said, what kind of puppies do you have? And she said, oh, they're called Lhasa Apso. You probably never heard of them. I said, oh, yes, I have. I said, are you going to sell them? She said, oh, yes. She said, they are for sale. And they were $200, except she had one for $150. And that was a lot of money. This was 1968, you know.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, when you're making, $6,000 or $7,000 a year as a teacher, $200 is lots of money. So, and we were also trying to buy a house at the time. So, spending that kind of money on a dog was, I went home and I wheedled and whined a little bit. And Raul had a friend who was had been a kennel manager for Arlene Swalwell, who had Windridge Cockers and Standard Poodles in the Monterey Bay area. And he had also shown Standard Poodles, Cocker Spaniels, American Cocker Spaniels, and miniature Schnauzers. And he said, oh, he said, this sounds interesting. He said, I'll help you pick a puppy. So we went to the woman's home, and he was armed with the AKC standard book. And we looked at the puppies, and he looked at them and examined them. And he said, she had told us what the prices were. And lo and behold, he said, the best puppy here is this one for $150. And she kind of was taken aback. And that was the one we took. And that was Taji, my first Lhasa Apso. Taji was everything I thought a Lhasa should be. I mean, she wasn't a fantastic specimen of the breed physically, but in terms of attitude, she had everything. She could escape from anything. She was fearless. When we bred her, I would always know when she was going to whelp, because that was the day she didn't escape from the kennel run. The kennel run had a 4-foot retaining wall backed by a 3-foot fence, and she could do a standing jump onto the 4-foot wall, then get up onto the 3-foot fence and walk the 2x4 like a cat and jump over. And then she always found something dead to roll in and come home. And I was pregnant and downwind, and so I would get sick. But she was special. And we showed her and realized quickly that she wasn't, show material. But they were so rare that you didn't exclude too many dogs from a breeding program. So we picked a very good sire for her, a group winner, Choshikitu, a Pandan. And she produced beautiful puppies, and we went from there. And then we bought a foundation bitch from Pat Chenoweth, Champion Chen Krista Somanor.
Okay.
That's
So a
how we
lot of the
started.
OPSOs, they go back to you being in a place that wasn't even in the United States. You were in Mexico. You all were there, and you encountered your first Lhasa Apsos. They were on your radar. You went back to Pittsburgh. You sort of got wind that a very well-to-do establishment had them. You thought it was out of reach, and just serendipitously in California,
Yep,
you ran into someone in the break room that just happened to have a litter of Lhasa Apsos who just happened to be substitute teaching that day.
yep. That is absolutely how it started.
And
Yep.
you got one, and you just ironically found someone that knew about AKC standards. Now, how long would had the breed been in AKC by that point?
Well, this was 1968, so roughly 30 years.
But they were
Uh,
still quite rare.
they were very rare still. Yes.
Okay.
This was the
And
late 60s.
okay, so let's go to the next slide because we have a few pictures to sort of bring this story together and keep talking about it. So you got your first dog and your first bitch, and then you ended up breeding her. Tell me about, the person that, you used for their sire and who you got your foundation bitch. Like, did that person like influence you to keep moving forward with showing and breeding?
Uh, actually, the first sire was owned by Elizabeth and Kiefer Labenberg, and they were part of the Northern California Lhasa group. There were a lot of serious Lhasa enthusiasts in Northern California, we learned. Uh, and we saw them we met everybody at a match. I mean, in those days, you would go to what we call fun matches, and there would be 600, 700 dogs entered.
Oh
It was
my.
a lot of shows these days. And people, it was very relaxed, and people socialized and got to know one another, a lot of potlucks and that kind of thing. And that's where we met Pat Chenoweth, saw her spectacular red Lhasa Apsos, which were stunning. Um, we decided, yeah, we were encouraged by our friend who had been a kennel manager because he had serious inside knowledge of dogs and dog shows. In fact, he was a friend of the late Derek Rain, who was a judge who was from Carmel, California. Uh, so, uh, it just happened. Quite frankly, I loved it. I loved the shows. When we had our first litter, my first litter was born the month after my first child was born. So I was into newborns all over the place and enjoyed it. Uh, and it was just something that took hold and never left.
So Cassandra, you knew that you were going to show from day one when you first got your first dog?
Uh, I didn't go into it with that intention, but Raul's friend, his name was Don Lopresti, he encouraged us to try it. And we said, oh, okay. And he directed us to a match and so forth. And uh, like I say, it took. It hooked us. I had a friend who called it an affliction.
Okay.
And
So
so
the affliction. All right, I love that. So Cassandra, who is the bitch on the screen?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
The bitch that's on the screen?
Uh, this bitch on the screen is champion Chen Krishna Somanor. She was a Chen Krishna Nor daughter. Uh, she was a straight Hamilton bitch. You can see the beautiful head type, strong nose leather. She had exquisite coat texture. She was a butterscotch gold. She had an amazing front assembly, well laid back shoulders, good return of upper arms, straight front legs, which is, we learned our appreciation of good fronts from her. Her rear, she was OFA certified, and her her pasterns were good, but a little narrow in the rear. Uh, Very fluid mover. We bred her 3 times. When we bred her, we outcrossed to Abbotsford because by that time we had moved to Washington State. And I saw the Abbotsford dogs and felt we wanted to do some things. We wanted more body, uh, substance in terms of musculature. We wanted to improve rear. And what we saw met what we wanted. And as you can imagine, breeding a straight Hamilton bitch to a total outcross like Abbotsford line was, I remember I was on the phone with Pat Chenoweth and told her what I planned to do. And it was sort of like, oh, it's,
You're courageous.
I've always been one to row my own boat, though. So
That's
we did.
awesome.
We bred her 3 times. She had 8 puppies. There were 5 champions. Uh, 2 of the puppies were what we call smooths, or Parapsos, and one didn't finish. So we felt that the outcross was pretty good.
Okay. So how does, did you always know, like, where does the name Centauri come from?
Well, we started out naming our effort after our first dog, Taji, because she was so special. But at that time, there were a lot of variants on that name. A lot of dogs, Tashi, Tasha, Taji, and so forth. So we thought it wasn't unique enough to be an identifier. And I ruminated and tried things out, and it, wasn't content. And one day I'm looking through an American Express International magazine, and I see an ad, and the ad depicts the kabuki lion dancer, this big, fearsome, graceful, powerful dancing figure, and the word the uh, caption was "Dare you be different," and it was advertising Suntory whiskey. Well, I don't drink whiskey. I prefer Cabernet, but uh, I loved the message, and I loved the depiction of the character. The strength, the grace, and I thought, you know what, that's it. This is going to be Suntory, and Suntory at that time was not in the United States even. I could have registered the name with the American Kennel Club as a registered kennel name if I had known, and it would have gone right through. But that is how we came upon the name Suntory.
All right, and on the screen we have for people that are trying to figure out a frame of reference for Centauri. This is a picture of some Japanese whiskey, and you see the name Centauri. So, Cassandra, I love how your story just is serendipity is the word. You chose your kennel name because you saw and heard something that was sexy in an American Express ad. You actually fell in love with Lhasa Apsos in Mexico. Like they just kept following you. Like this is what these breeder chronicles are all about. Like most people probably don't know that about the Centauri dogs when they see them. So this is great. Let's keep chatting. We've talked about the beginning. You all are now in Washington. So your first litters were born up in Washington, where you are now?
No, they were born in California.
They were born in California.
California, yes. We lived in California just a few years. Let's see, 1967 to late 73. So it was in late 73 that we moved to Washington State. Raul came up here for a job,
Okay,
and we
so
stayed.
we've heard about some early inspiration, which was someone that lived, in the community that you lived in. But in thinking about the broader fancy, it sounds like Raul's friend, who was a kennel manager, was quite influential on you all. He showed up when you were picking out a pet dog with an AKC standard to help you pick out the best dog of the litter. So, who are some of the people that were inspirational to you in the beginning and maybe influential, and then even today? Who are people that are still inspiring and influential to you? So let's start there.
Okay, who are still inspiring and influential? Oh
So you can
my.
start at the beginning and talk about people that
Okay,
were
at the
inspiring and
beginning.
influential
The
there,
beginning was
then
our
and even
yeah.
now.
Okay, the beginning was our friend Don LaPresti. He taught me principles of breeding ethics. He was a highly ethical individual. And I got to know Pat Chenoweth, Lhasa Apsos, very well. I spent a lot of time at Pat's home, uh, talking about dogs, looking at dogs. I saw things I liked, things I didn't like. You know, it's uh, I I approach everyone with I think that there is something in everyone that you can learn from to improve. I always think, you know, what does this person know that I don't know that I can be useful to me? And of course, conversely, I'm always willing to share. I think that also you can say, well, you can glean and sort through and say, this part I like, this I'm not so sure about, that I don't think so. So I approach everyone with the notion that I can learn something from them. Uh, I learned an awful lot from Pat. I met Grace Likos a few times, Likos losses. In fact, Grace was a big powerhouse in the Lhasa Apso Club of Southern California at the time. Uh, to let you know how powerful she was, we attended a dinner the evening of a specialty in Southern California, huge specialty at the Beverly Hills Kennel Club. And the guest of honor at that dinner was Tenzing Norgay, the Sherpa who led Edmund Hillary to the summit. So I met Tenzing Norgay through
I'll say
Grace.
that must have been a dinner party that was worth attending.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. Uh, so I never met Marie Stillman or Gloria Fowler. I talked to Gloria Fowler, of course, who was Everglow, on the phone a few times. Talking to Gloria Fowler was always interesting, but difficult in as much as in those days you had to pay for long distance calls, and Gloria talked. So, but I learned mostly from Pat, who had learned from Grace, and when we moved to California, of course, you know, there was a separation of geography from Pat. And when I got here, the first show, one of the first shows I attended was Seattle Kennel Club. And there was this elderly couple there with this black party color Lhasa. And she was using this funny rake type thing on his coat. And I thought, my God, the dog is going to have a coat left. Until I looked at him when she put him on the floor and he had enough coat for 3 dogs. Uh, I thought, isn't it cute? This woman wants to show her dog. And it turned out she won the breed that day in the group, and that was Georgia Roberts, who was affectionately called Robbie, Abbotsford Losses. And that's how we met the Roberts. Also got to know them through Bob and Nancy Danberg of Paw Prints. So when we moved up this way, that became my sphere of influence. And we visited the Roberts at their home a number of times, spent time on the phone, used Abbotsford dogs at stud.
So was that the first, those were the first, was that the first stud dogs that you used or
No, the
no,
first
no,
dog
no, because
I,
you had the earlier one.
I had the earlier ones in California. I had used Chin Quorum Tea. Uh, that was the big winner that Pat Chenoweth had. Uh, I'd never used, did I use Chin Christendor? I might have used Chin Christendor once with a bitch that I co-owned. And of course, the first dog I used, which was Choshikitu of Pandan. Uh, Beautiful dog. He was gold, well balanced, dead level top line. But the most impressive thing about him was when we went to visit the Lavenbergs to see him, he was in the backyard. It was a sunny Northern California afternoon. And he just floated across the yard. It's like his feet did not touch the ground, but he covered the expanse of the yard in no time at all, effortlessly. And I thought, that is beautiful. And that was how we basically, that set the standard for me for motion, quite frankly. That smooth, effortless gliding motion
So
that the
in
dog,
that moment, you knew this
that,
is the type of movement
yes,
that
exactly.
takes you
I
further.
loved it. I didn't know what caused it. I didn't know the mechanics of it. All I knew is I saw it and I knew that that was good.
Good deal. So what about today? Who are people, maybe they don't have to be in Lhasas, but just in the broader fancy that you've been inspired and influenced by?
Of course, we've cut back a lot in the last few years. I like to get to know people in other breeds. I, I like to watch Deborah Ferguson with the poodles, Jay Serion with the bulldogs. These are people who breed as well as show. I've got little Wellens with Great Danes. Uh, I think that the more you learn from people in other breeds, the more you learn about your own dogs. Uh, I'm learning a lot from Marcus Secchi. Mark has basically Shih Tzu, but he worked for a lot of the early Lhasa handlers and Emily Gunning and people like that. Oh, he worked for Galaxy, Ellen Voss. So he knows Lhasas. He's third generation dogs. So basically, his understanding of structure and movement is very deep, and we share ideas. It's kind of fun talking to him because we can talk dogs. We can, oh, you remember that dog? Yes. And we'll describe him and talk about how this was good about him, that wasn't, or could be improved. I love talking about dogs, and I love pedigrees. Uh, I can I like reading pedigrees, not just my own dogs, but other people's dogs, looking and finding traits that come. So basically, you have to understand at my age, most of everybody is gone. That's so, I'm sort of in an era where everybody who's coming up at me is new, or so having, I have to look outward to other people my age for inspiration.
Well, inspiration comes from a lot of different places. And there's still inspiration to be found. And maybe it's in judges or people that do service to the club. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but this is all very good, Cassandra. I love that you are learning and co-creating ideology with people from other breeds. And we're going to talk about some of your activities and your all breed club, but let's talk about some of the Centauri dogs, right? We've talked about where you started from. We've talked about your inspiration, your influences, your kennel name, your original dogs that make up your breeding line. Let's look more in depthly. So on the screen, we've got a lovely black dog to the left. Why don't you tell us about the dog to the left, and then we'll talk about the dog to the right, and then we'll keep doing this for a little bit just so people can learn a little bit more about these dogs. And if you know who the judge was in the picture, um, you can also tell us about the judge.
Okay. The dog to the left is National Best in Specialty winner, Suntory Super Fudge. Super Fudge is pictured there in the classes. The judge is Phyllis Marcy, Norbalinka Lhasa Apsos. That was the only time I was ever able to take a dog under her. Super Fudge was a, not, I wouldn't say small, but he was probably 10 3/4 inches. He's small by today's standards. Uh, Black, obviously, very slow maturing line. He favored the Chen losses in his pedigree in that regard. He was probably 3 years old there. That was a major win. That year, we showed at the national specialty, and he was third out of three in bred by because he was still very undeveloped. Uh, he got his development over the next year, and when he was 4, we took him to the national and bred by. He finished the first day. No, he didn't finish the first day. He got a major the first day. The second day I showed him under Norman Herbal, who gave him best of breed from Bred By, over 250 losses. He wasn't finished yet. So the scariest show I ever went to was when I showed him the next time, thinking I just had this enormous win, and now this dog will probably lose and not get those last couple singles that he needs. He did not particularly like to show. The day of the National, was probably the best he ever gave me. And he really did give me that day. Very smooth moving dog, nicely built, fun to be around. He went to Denmark for a while. He was not enough dog for the Europeans at that time in that area. He was considered a little bitchy. So he was there just for a year. He came home and wound up his retirement years with Bob Prenger in Michigan. As I recall, he OFA certified at age 10. So nice sound little dog. I was proud of him. I enjoyed him. The dog on the right
And
is Prada, Champion Suntory Prada, a group winner, best in specialty winner. The judge is Norman Patton. Prada was a lot of fun. She was a clown. Just she was a good dog. I just loved her. For her personality.
Sounds like some great memories there. Now, Cassandra, have you won the national more than once?
No, no, I haven't. That was the win of a lifetime.
Good for you. Let's keep going. You know, I love a party colored dog. So tell us
Okay.
about this party.
Okay. This is Champion Gyancy of Abbotsford. He was the pick of the litter of the last Abbotsford litter. He is sired by one of my dogs, Champion Suntory Affirmative Action. We'll talk about Gyancy first. First of all, the judge is George Payton, who handled losses quite extensively. He was an authority at that time. When Jim and Georgia Roberts retired, well, actually, Jim decided that they were going to stop showing and breeding dogs. And Robbie kind of convinced they had seen Affirmative Action, whom we called Angus, who was sired by Samar, their dog. And they really liked him. And Robbie went to Jim and said, maybe we could just breed one more litter and use, Cassandra's Angus. And he sort of wavered and didn't say no. And she said, okay, I'll do it. So I was just gobsmacked that she would want to use my dog and very honored. So we took the dog up to their place to breed to Dolly the bitch. And when we got word from her that Dolly was pregnant, but in February of the year he was born, the litter had not been born. And we were on the phone and she said, they want to send me to the hospital. They said, I have a gallbladder problem. Can you imagine that? So, we finished our conversation and she went to the hospital. Well, the gallbladder problem turned out to be terminal pancreatic cancer. And she was in the hospital for about a month and they could not understand why she hadn't passed because she was very grave. So the day the puppies were born, her daughter Jeannie went to the hospital and whispered in her ear, Mom, the puppies are born and this is what we have. And she whispered, that's nice, dear. And she died the next day. So we went to the funeral. And Raul was a pallbearer. the family took us aside afterwards and said, we have the puppies and you own the sire, and we want you to take the pick of the litter as your stud fee. And we said, oh, no, that's not necessary. Oh, yes, they said, we insist. So when the puppies were old enough, we went up and looked at them, and the choice, basically, there were 3 or 4 puppies, but the choice was between this dog, the only male, and a very nice bitch. And I went back and forth, and Guy was a little more undershot than I would like, but I liked him, and so we took him. And uh, I got him in coat. He was an amazing dog to show. He would give you anything you wanted, and he got before I basically cut back because we had teenagers and I needed to spend more time with them. There was a little span of shows where I got 5 group firsts and 7 shows with them. Uh, we probably could have done a whole lot more, but I had more important things that I needed to attend to at that time. But that was Guy, and I think he was a very special dog under special circumstances.
Did you ever have other party dogs that did that much winning?
Not that much winning, no, but they weren't Guy either.
You
I've had
hardly
some,
see, we hardly see party color dogs at all in the show ring now.
yeah.
They're so very rare.
I
Um,
have had other party colors and I've had them do well, but I've had some exciting party colors. Didn't like the show. I can say that was actually one thing about the Abbotsford dogs that was pretty typical is they weren't dynamic in presenting themselves. They were very laid back, but of course at that time with temperament issues that helps also.
yeah, the trade-off, right? So
It
what
was a
about
trade.
these 2 dogs here
Okay, that is affirmative action on the
to the
left.
left?
Yes. Uh, he was, again, an amazing dog. He and I had a spiritual connection. Uh, I finished him. I did some nice winning with him. I didn't do any serious specialing with him because it was so hard with a black at that time. But Neil Graves took him to Canada for a year. And in Canada, he was shown 60 times. He had, I think, 4 or 5 best in show and 20 group first. Uh, that dog loved to show. And his son, Guy, he is the sire of the previous slide, inherited that. A effortless moving dog. They both, again, the feet did not touch the ground. Angus Wade, he was born, he was an 8-ounce puppy. He was fat. I mean, all you saw was this little blimp of a body with these stubs of legs and a head sticking out. And I said, oh my God, he looks like a little Angus bull. And the name stuck. So, but he weighed 17 pounds at maturity. But when he moved, you would have thought that he weighed nothing. Uh,
Right.
so he was an amazing animal. The one on the right is Bodnath Jigme. Uh, I believe he is an affirmative action great grandson. Uh, I got him from Elaine King. Elaine had used one of my dogs at stud. And when her puppies were 10 months old, she was found dead in her home. She apparently had had a catastrophic medical event. And she had left written instructions for her sister what was to happen to her dogs if anything happened to her. And Ziggy and his sister were to come to me. And so we brought them home. And those 2 little devils screamed for the first 3 months they were here. Of course, they were badly traumatized by everything that happened. They were alone in the house with her for about 24 hours before she was found. But again, he was undershot, but the teeth didn't show, but everything else about him was so nice. And I determined to finish both of them for my friend, and he did so well that we just kept on with him. He got a best in show. I put my first AKC all breed best in show on that dog, so that he was special in that regard, and a very nice producer as well. So
Well, that's wonderful. And I think we have this.
that is super fudge. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And this is the ALAC picture.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Well, just side note, someone on the presentation was born just a couple of days before that.
I sorry, what was that again?
I said someone on this call was born just a couple of days before you won that specialty.
Oh, really? Well, let's see. I don't think it was myself. I told you I'm older than dirt.
1987. While I was being born, you were winning specialties. That is just
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, Cassandra, thank you for, I'm sure there are many other beautiful Centauri dogs that we could have talked about, but of course the presentation can't go forever. But I loved hearing about those different dogs and, the people that, trusted you with them and the stories that brought them to your life and your breeding program. They all have such tremendous sentimental value. Speaking of which, is anybody still breeding Abbotsford line, or is that line still influential today?
You will find Abbotsford dogs behind many dogs, but they they are far back in the pedigree. There, in fact, in many cases, you're going to go off the back of a four-generation pedigree to find them.
So they were
What
quite
happens?
influential.
Yes, you will find, that's uh, they have been used. They have infused the breed. But as far as anybody breeding Abbotsford dogs, no, because that line is no longer in existence other than through what it has contributed to the breed. Every once in a while, I'll get a puppy and it'll have a certain look and manifest certain traits, maybe behavioral traits that I know to be typical of the line. And I'll say, there's an Abbotsford puppy. And but I don't claim to breed Abbotsford dogs. I don't think anybody has that, because you can find them behind many, many dogs and many, many lines. And uh, they have given to the breed and are part of it.
And what about Hamilton? You had some Hamilton influence at the very beginning when you started. Are there people still actively breeding Hamilton?
You know, I I really can't answer that. I think that perhaps if you look at Kathy Marley's dogs, you might find a bit of that. Kathy has been very determined in and focused. I think is a better word in her vision, and I think perhaps that is what has come in there. I haven't studied far back enough in her pedigrees to know exactly. Darby McSorley in Northern California is another one, but she and Kathy have done things together. Uh, I think perhaps if anyone, those two that come to mind, there may be others. Uh, I would no longer call them Hamilton losses. I would call them, Hamilton, uh, Hamilton influenced losses. You know, Hamilton Kennels had its own program, its own vision, and so forth. What people take from somebody else's vision and move forward with then becomes theirs. It no longer is what that was. All they
Right.
can say is that this is a foundation that I used to build what I have. It's just like if you can give a subject and a set of paints to four different artists. And it's the same subject, the exact same paints. Each one of them will come forward with a different rendering of that subject.
Absolutely. And that's good. That's good
That
that the
is what
world
breeding
has
is,
that
that's what bloodlines
interpretation.
are.
That's wonderful. So Cassandra, in thinking about, influence, have there been people that you have supported to start breeding, to start showing that maybe you want to discuss for a little bit?
Uh, you know, I people have dropped out, by the way, as you know, that I was active in this breed when, well, for example, when Fudge won the national, there were 250 dogs that day. You know what the numbers are today.
I've never seen, if I combine all the dogs that I'd ever seen at a national, it wouldn't come up to 250.
That is right. And that was only the second largest entry. The following year, I believe there were 274 or 75. And it's gone down from there. Uh, I helped people get started. There were people in California I helped, and they have left. Bob Prenger in Michigan, I worked with him. Bob had some unfortunate health problems, and now, uh, you know, basically is out of dogs. I I share. I share where I can. I influence where I can. I I've always believed that everybody should do his or her own thing, and to that extent, I'll help someone, but I don't impose myself on them because that's not my place.
Okay, good, good. Well, I have certainly spent significant amount of time when I've needed stuff from you and have always appreciated your in-depth knowledge about it. But I always will remember the first time we ever had an in-depth conversation, it was like, and you will figure out what works for you. That was your advice to me. Like, so try things and you'll figure out your style and what works for you, and that's okay. And I continue to be influenced by that because, like you, I kind of do my own thing in
Mhm.
all areas of life. So we need that influence.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of great memories. Let's maybe talk about a few more. So talk about winning the national in 1987. You know, talk about being in Mexico when you first are around Lhasa Apsos. What are some other memories that are really memorable that just bind your heart with Lhasa Apsos that much more?
Okay. Holding those wet puppies from my first litter and actually from every litter. That that's special. Uh, my first AKC, all breed best in show. My second one, my first group win. Uh, that's watching my daughter go best junior. Those those are the kind of things that I find memorable.
What would you say has been your most memorable national?
Oh, of course, of course, the national that I won from Bred by. My goodness, there are so few people who get to share that experience that it has to be, you know, a not just memorable, but special beyond belief.
Okay.
Uh, I like watching other people be successful when I have given them hints or help. Those
Yeah,
things are
absolutely.
important to me. Yeah. We had
What would you say is your favorite show of the year?
my favorite show.
Uh-huh.
Uh, my favorite show was the old Santa Barbara show, the original Santa Barbara show, which I attended that one twice. In fact, I was best of winners the second time with affirmative action under Peter B. Thompson, who was a very renowned judge. Subsequent Santa Barbaras were not as special. But the first Santa Barbara was amazing. I mean, they wouldn't call for cleanup; they would call for Code 13 in Ring 5. It was very elegant and refined. Uh, my first Westminster, when we were benched at the Garden, is memorable. I had a good time. I didn't win. I showed my dog. But the overwhelming presence of that show and having so many people packed into that space was it's exciting, but almost a little frightening because all I could think of was if there's an emergency here, we are all in trouble. That's uh,
I still think about that when we go up to
yeah. No,
Westminster.
um, in fact, it was 2 weeks after my first Westminster. I went to the Seattle Kennel Club show, and they had a tape on the floor where you had to maintain the aisles for fire and so forth. I think I was 6 inches over the tape, and I had a fire marshal come and say to me, "Ma'am, you have got to move back behind that tape. We need this space." And I thought, "Wow, what a difference!" So, you know, I have so many memorable moments. You figure 55 years, but the biggest ones are the kind that I just described. Some of them aren't at shows. That's like holding wet puppies. That's at birth, knowing that you're helping bring in life. Cliff,
Absolutely. That's, I think that's my favorite thing is maybe not holding wet puppies, but watching them, watching the mom look at you as, contractions are coming and just being a part of that. Of course, I do birth in real life. That's my actual real profession too. So sort of a birth junkie all the way around, but these are great memories. And so the Santa Barbara show doesn't exist anymore.
oh, well, there is a Santa Barbara show, but it's
But
not
it's not like that.
not like that. No.
Even in my time, my favorite show was, a show that happened over in Hampton, Virginia, down on the coast, and those shows went away. So shows are you fall in love with a show and a show site, and then it goes away or it moves to another place, and it's just not the same anymore. So it's great to have those memories, and be able to talk about them. And there's someone that's going to be listening to this, and they're going to say, "I remember how elegant the old Santa Barbara shows were," and they're going to go down memory lane right along with you. So thank you for sharing that. And let's keep going as we get ready to wrap this up. And let's talk about, your service to the fancy. We talked about breeding, we talked about showing and all of those things, but those things don't happen in isolation. You've served in a variety of different roles. And why don't you briefly tell us about some of the meaningful work that you've been able to do through organized, dog organizations?
Well, I have been a member of the American Lhasa Apso Club since I think 1970 or 71. Uh, I have served on the board. I was national futurity chair. Uh, I recall when I was futurity chair, I think the biggest year we had was there were 113 litters nominated. So
Wow.
there again is an example of comparison of perspective in terms of where we are in terms of numbers. I served on the board. I was president of ALAC for 2 years. I stepped away from that. I think that I brought a lot of organization to the club at that time, uh, a lot of structure to the meetings, and we set up a system to get the treasury audited, on a regular basis, that kind of thing, a nuts and bolts type leadership. Uh,
I have no
I
problem believing that.
yeah, uh, I uh, I was influential in developing the code of ethics, in the establishment of the Health Education and Genetics Foundation. I worked on all of those type things. I also wrote the breed column for the Gazette following Pat Chenoweth's death. I did that, the Gazette column, 4 times a year for a lot of years. It's,
I've read those columns. So what about like, in your local area, your all breed club or local specialty club?
uh, quite frankly, I was a member of the Lhasa Apso Club of Northern California. For a time, I belonged to the Gig Harbor. I mean, sorry, not the Gig Harbor, the Willamette Valley Lhasa Apso Club, which is no longer in existence. Uh, I belonged for a while to the Cascade Lhasa Apso Fanciers of Greater Seattle, which is almost non-existent at this point. It's hanging on, but barely. Uh, I my all breed club, Gig Harbor Kennel Club, I belonged to for oh, more than 15 years. I've served on the board. This is my second time being president of the club. I, again, the first time I was president, I got the club straightened out in terms of its organization and structure, treasury, got the books straightened out, put the club on a path to function like a club, and then let someone else take it over. And he did a good job, did it for a while, and he was ready for a change. So I took it back and moved us into the Western Washington cluster. We did that for about 7 years, and now we're going to be going back to having our own standalone show because the cluster situation, quite frankly, we had a beautiful facility and so forth, but the expense of putting on a dog show is phenomenal. And doing one at a major facility is mind boggling in terms of money. And because of declining entries uh,
Right.
across everywhere, you just can't make it financially. Uh, the rent for 3 days plus setup for a fairground such as the one we were in can go between 77 and $90,000. So,
Oh my. Yeah,
oh
I
yeah,
think
that's
people don't recognize, what it takes to put on a show, etc. And thinking about all of your years of service at, the leadership level and helping with accountability and modernization, streamlining and efficiency, all of those things, what would be your advice to um both clubs and individuals on how to engage each other, because the clubs need to engage individuals and individuals need to be engaged with the clubs. And I think in a lot of areas, people are missing those marks where they don't have, volunteers coming in or people feeling like they've been alienated and so forth. But you have somehow been active in these organizations for decades. What is your advice to people?
well, the first thing you have to do is you have to approach what you do from the standpoint of service. You're providing a service. You're providing a service, first of all, to the fancy purebred dogs. You're providing a service to your breed. You're providing a service to your fellow exhibitors. You're providing a service to your organization, to your community. And I think that the service component rather than self-interest component is what's paramount. Put aside, uh, the notion, okay, the judges dinner so I can get FaceTime with judges, and the next time he or she sees me, they'll know that we hired them, blah blah blah. All that is the old politics, and it's not a healthy attitude. If you look at it, what can I do to help? How can I help make this better? We can we can start building from there. Another thing is to develop the art of listening. Listen to other people, find out what they think, find out what they have to share, find out what they want to do to help. Don't hang on to roles that are outdated. Adapt to the situation, to what we are dealing with today. I think that one of the things that we are missing in terms of health of the fancy and the breed is community involvement. Uh, the the clubs and the organizations that do the best are those that have developed a solid foundation in their community. They have shown their community that they are of value to them. We are going to a new show site that is a beautiful park. And what we are going to do is develop a community component. We are going to make ourselves visible to that community. We're going to have activities to bring the community in, to educate people on the responsible dog ownership. In fact, this is one of the things that the Parks Board wants. They want more responsible dog ownership in the area. And when you do these things, when the outside influences who would destroy what we value come at us, the animal rights activists and so forth, when you have that strong community support, you become inoculated against a lot of this.
Absolutely.
Going
Maybe it makes
local,
your participation more meaningful also.
yes, yes, but there again, you have to go back to the idea of service. What are you willing to give? This isn't an effort, an undertaking, which you just take. You take ribbons, you take points, you take ego gratification. What do you give back? That is, how can I be of value? How can I help? I think is what is of paramount importance for our survival.
Very, very well said. And Cassandra, as we get ready to close up, any pearls of wisdom that you want to give, and it's not just to the next generation, it's to the current generation. Anything you would like to speak to, current situations where we're seeing declines in the breed. You talk about, over 100 litters being nominated for fraternity. I'm not even sure we even come close to even having that number of litters born, just period, amongst other things. So in closing up today, someone that has given decades of their life to the breed and to the fancy, what advice do you have in general?
Uh, I think I've pretty well said it, but I think that you have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit. And sacrifice is something that is no longer in vogue. Uh, I think, you know, I really can't say other than to say that, what am I willing to give? How can I help? Is an attitude that we need to foster and realize that people are not one dimensional. Everybody has good things about them. Everybody has things you don't care for about them. Go with the good and ignore the things that aren't so great, and take it from there, and realize that unless we have a shared vision, unless we, all work together, we ain't gonna make it, because the
Come
numbers
together.
not, we are stronger together, and the statistics and the numbers basically are saying it. You look at the numbers of dog shows, the entries, financially it's becoming unfeasible for people putting on dog shows, and unless we look beyond our narrow self-interests, we are not going to be around in the next
Absolutely.
20 years.
So, Cassandra, considering all these decades of years with the breed, just one question as we get ready to say goodbye. Would you do it all over again?
In a heartbeat.
You would do it all over again with the same breed, right?
I would do that, absolutely. The only thing I would do different, I'd make sure I lived with a couple of acres. I have run a small breeding program in the city with neighbors who were very tolerant, and but I would do it all over again. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being our inaugural Reader Chronicle for our ALAC Legacy Project. Thank you very much, Cassandra Dela Rosa of Suntory Lhasa Apsos in Washington State in the United States. I hope that wherever you're listening and whoever you are, that you are inspired and you will join me in applauding this dedicated individual for all of her years of work and dedication to the breed. And until we meet again, let's keep breeding, let's keep showing, let's keep working together, let's keep serving, let's keep preserving the Lhasa Apso breed. Again, thank you very much, Cassandra, for sharing all of this great information with us. And I invite you to continue tuning in to our ongoing chronicles of our Lhasa Apso breeders. Good day.